Hey guys, what's up? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with some DraftKings tight end tips for week one. There's a couple guys we're going to give you for cash game play and a couple other guys who are a little bit more of a long shot play that you can try to use in some of your tournaments if you're looking for a cheap, low-owned guy who can give you some upside. In cash game play, you want to stick to the guys that you're the most certain of. Tight end is one of the positions that has the least amount of certainty overall, so the one guy on top of the list is going to be Rob Gronkowski. Now, Gronk is in a class all by himself at the tight end position. When you want to roster a guy like Gronkowski, what you really have to ask yourself is, can I get more points or can I get safer points out of rostering Gronk and whatever lower cost option I have to take at a running back or a wide receiver position? Or do I want to take a high-end wide receiver or running back and go a little bit cheaper at tight end? What you want to try to decide is which one of those pairings is going to get you more points. Gronk is basically like the same as rostering a high-end running back or a high-end tight end with the production that he gives you, especially with Tom Brady back in the fold over there. You know he gets a lot of looks in the red zone. You know he's going to make a bunch of catches, and you know he's one of the few tight ends in the league that can threaten 100 yards just about every time he goes out there. I mean, you know, there's basically very little that you have to consider here. Gronk is far and away the best tight end in football and best tight end for fantasy football. If you can afford to put him in your roster, it's never a bad idea. Now, in week one for cash games, I do think he does make for a good play because there's enough value at other positions that you can fill it in. You know, with the injuries that we had, with the position battles that went a different way than people had expected earlier in the year, you're going to be able to find some guys like a Eddie Royal, like a Devontae Adams, maybe even like an Alfred Blue, who are all subbing in for injured players and going to be getting a lot bigger, lion's share of the workload at a very low price. So if you can put one or two of those guys in there and it allows you to fit in Gronk, it's definitely a good idea to do because based on the tight end hierarchy, he's the guy who's going to be the safest and give you the most upside. Now, he's not the only guy that you could look at. Gronk is $7,000, which is a pretty fair price for him over on DraftKings. I don't think that's too expensive, but it's also not very cheap. If you're looking to go a little bit cheaper, there are two other guys that are pretty safe who I wouldn't mind rolling out there. The next guy I want to talk about is Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen with the Carolina Panthers. He's one of those guys who gets a lot of targets, winds up getting a bunch of catches, and even gets some looks in the red zone. With Kelvin Benjamin no longer being an option down there in Carolina, I think that his red zone targets are actually even going to go up a little more too, because they don't have a lot of receivers that you really think are going to be big threats in the end zone. Rookie Devin Funchess is somebody who might be that. He's a big guy. He's pretty tall. He does have some mass on him, so he might be a guy who gets a couple red zone looks too. But I still think that Greg Olsen's going to be somebody who gets a lot of them. Olsen's price is $5,300. As I said, on a PPR site, he's a good guy to look at because he does get, 6 to 10 looks every game, sometimes even more. He had games last year where he had double-digit catches. He did have a game where he scored, where he got the 100 yards on the bonus. So if you're looking at the tight end position, obviously Gronk is head and shoulders above, but Olsen is not a bad, second option to look at if you're looking to save some money, and he's only $5,300. The next guy you can look at is Martellus Bennett from the Chicago Bears. He's at $4,300 today. He's another guy who had double-digit catches in a couple games last year, had 6 or 8 catches in a lot of other games, gets you about 60 to 80 yards, finished just shy of 1,000 yards on the season. So if you're looking for some more safety, he's another guy. Gives you a big discount off a guy like Gronk, probably about a 40% discount going down from $7,000 to $4,300. So he's somebody that you can put in there if you did decide that you'd rather go with one of the bigger options at wide receiver or running back instead of using Gronk as one of the guys that you spend up on. Bennett plays against Green Bay. He did have a big game against Green Bay last year, had 9 catches, like 140 yards the first time they played. The second time they played, they really made a concentrated effort of stopping him. I think he only wound up with 2 or 3 catches for like 30 or 40 yards or so. So there is a little bit of risk to it. But again, at the tight end position, you're not going to have a lot of guys who are very safe on a week in, week out basis outside of a guy like Gronk. And that's why Gronk is the number one option, and a guy like Greg Olsen is the second option because they are the two who do get targets pretty much game in and game out. So that kind of wraps it up for our cash game plays. Gronk is the top option. Greg Olsen is second. Martellus Bennett is third. Now, if you're looking for some flyers to take in your tournament, if you want a cheap guy that you can look at in the tournament, what we really want to look for at the tight end position is guys who can get us a touchdown, because touchdowns is usually how guys wind up getting high scores at the tight end position. One guy who I really like is Ladarius Green. He's $3,500 from San Diego. Word is that he's going to be taking over the Antonio Gates role with Gate out on suspension to start the season. If you remember last year, Gates is a guy who does get a couple looks every game, but he got a lot of looks when they got down into the red zone area. So if Green is going to be taking over for that Gates role and he's going to get some looks in the red zone area, he's somebody who can get you a touchdown. At only 3,500, if he gets you 3 catches, 30 yards, and a touchdown, he's going to return great value for you and be somebody that will really help booster your tournament rosters. I don't like his safety. I don't think that he's a guy who I could roll out there in my cash games and count on that happening. But I do think he's somebody that you can take a flyer on in a tournament and, save yourself some money to go up and get some of the big studs at the other positions that you might want to put in your roster. Another guy along the same line, excuse me, who's even cheaper is Mikael Rivera from the Oakland Raiders. Now, Rivera is only $2,700, so he is dirt cheap. And this is a guy who last year had a couple games with 6 to 10 catches. He had 100 yards one game, picked up a couple touchdown passes along the way as well. And I do think that Oakland is going to be trailing in this game as well. So whenever Oakland's trailing and they're throwing the ball, Rivera is somebody who's an option. Oakland's been running out a lot of 2 tight end sets to start the year. And when they do run their 2 tight end sets, basically Rivera is more of like a receiving tight end than he is a blocking tight end. So he's the guy who they usually send out in patterns. And I think that he's going to be somebody who's going to have more room to operate this year, with a guy like Armani Cooper on the outside who's going to be drawing a little bit of attention. So if you're looking for another cheap option, I think Rivera could be that guy that could be sneaky. At 2,700, he really doesn't need to do a lot. If he makes 4 catches for 50 yards, he basically gives you over 3 times value and would be a very useful piece to put in there and also help you save some salary to spend up at other positions. A couple other guys worth mentioning. You got Jordan Cameron at only 3,800. Cameron is now down in Miami. That Miami team is supposed to be looking to pass a little more. Tannehill's a guy who's been doing pretty well in the preseason, so he could be somebody who's an option. Could also look at a guy like Tyler Eifert. My problem with Eifert is I don't think that they're going to be trailing in this game, so I don't know how much passing Cincinnati's going to be doing. And they do have everybody healthy, so you got guys like Sano, you got guys like A.J. Green, you got guys like Marvin Jones. There's a lot of mouths to feed down there in Cincinnati. Even a guy like Gio Bernard out of the backfield is going to get some of those looks in the passing game. So I don't think that Eifert has huge upside in a game where I expect them to be in the lead, but he's another cheap option who should be in for a big year. Another guy that you can look at is Delaney Walker. Walker's the tight end for Tennessee. He's going to be the security blanket for Marcus Mariota this year. So I do think that he's going to get a lot of looks too. Whenever you have a rookie quarterback back there, you always want to make sure that they have some good outlets to make some easy throws to. And Delaney Walker's a guy who has really good hands and had some pretty good games last year. He's also a pretty good threat in the red zone, although I don't see this Tennessee team scoring a lot of points, so I don't know how many opportunities he's going to get down there. But that basically rounds out my list of guys that I'm looking at the tight end position for week 1. You will notice that I did not put Jimmy Graham on this list. I know some people like him a lot more than I do. I want to take a wait-and-see attitude with that Seattle offense and see how they're going to use him. Basically, the big stat that people talk about before the year. Last year, Drew Brees threw over 600 passes. Russell Wilson threw basically almost over 400. So Seattle throws the ball about a third less than they did over in New Orleans. Not that all of those targets would have went to Jimmy Graham, but you got to figure that, at the least maybe a third to a quarter of the targets that he did see are going to be less over there in Seattle. So I do want to take a wait and see approach here. If he goes out and has a big game week 1 and burns me, well, you know what? That'll happen sometimes. But in daily fantasy, you have to take some stands somewhere. You can't take every single guy. And he's one of the guys that I'm not looking at this week. Again, like I said, he could wind up burning me, but I think I'm more comfortable taking a guy like a Gronk or a guy like an Olsen, or if I have to go cheap, going with a guy like a Green or a Rivera to try to get some more upside in my roster and save some money to get some of the big studs at the other position. So that's been our tight end primer for week 1. Remember, there's a lot of money out there this week. DraftKings has a tournament paying out $2 million the first and $1 million the second. There's big tournaments on FanDuel. There's big tournaments on Fantasy Feud. There's big tournaments on Fantasy Aces. I mean, you name it, Fantasy Draft. Wherever you play, there's going to be some big tournaments for week 1. And a lot of times there's usually a little bit of overlay. So make sure you get some money out there. And good luck, everybody. As always, stay classy, DFS.